Okay, welcome everybody. We are very excited to have you all join us today. I'd like to welcome you to the Fielding Alumni Focus webinar titled Book Publishing, How Hard Can It Be? My name is Hillary Molina and I'm the Associate Director of University Relations at Fielding. Before we get started today, I'd like to share with you how this webinar is going to be conducted. First of all, this is being recorded and it will be posted on our alumni website, which is alumni.fielding.edu. Our host for this webinar, Dr. Carol Ann Minsky, who I will introduce in a moment, will serve as moderator for the next hour. Towards the end of the hour, you will have the opportunity to ask questions of the panelists by using the Q&A function in your drop-down menu. The only people you will see on your screen today are the panelists, so you don't have to worry about your camera being on. Dr. Minsky will field your questions at the end of the panel discussion by reading them from the Q&A submissions. So please feel free to submit your questions throughout the discussion. If you have a specific question for one of the panelists, please indicate the panelist's name in your question. If we don't get to your question during the hour, all the panelists' contact information will be provided at the end of the webinar on your screen, so you will have their contact information for later use. During the Q&A towards the end of the hour, there will be an online poll that will pop up on your screen for about 15 seconds. This is completely optional, but it's helpful for planning future webinars and alumni-related activities. Also, within the next few days, you will receive a survey via email for deeper feedback you may wish to provide about this webinar, and we thank you in advance for your participation. That's all that I have for the instructions, so without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator for the day, Dr. Carol Ann Minsky. Dr. Minsky has over 25 years leadership experience in executive level and management roles. As founder and president of CMA Leadership Consultants, her expertise includes consulting, coaching, training, and talent development services. In her background as Director of Training and Workforce Development, she provided organizational consulting for over 300 businesses. She also designed career advancement centers for Pennsylvania State University campuses and Arcadia University. She currently designs leadership training and coaching programs for Fortune 500 companies and nonprofits. Her new book, Focus, Get What You Want Out of Life, was just published this summer. It is an honest and inspiring look at the obstacles women face and the real strategies they use to achieve their goals. It is now available on Amazon in book and Kindle versions. Dr. Minsky has an MBA from Philadelphia University and an MA in counseling from Arcadia University and a PhD in human and organizational development from Fielding Graduate University. I would like to personally thank Carol for bringing this idea to me for an alumni webinar and for taking the extra time to work with the Office of Alumni Relations to make today happen. Dr. Minsky, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hillary, and welcome everyone to Book Publishing, How Hard Can It Be? Now, today's discussion is actually going to center around a survey that had gone out to alumni and students and questions and concerns around publishing. I had developed the questionnaire, and Hillary was kind enough to develop a survey monkey, get it out through social media, get the word out. And we were so excited to have a response of 62 to the survey. And this result, as I understand, was one of the largest in the alumni office. So I want to say kudos to Hillary and also thank you for getting the promotions out for today's event. Now I'm going to introduce our panel, and we'll go through all of the introductions first, and then we'll start with self-publishing, and all of us are going to share our processes on either self-publishing or the traditional ways of publishing. So first up, I'm going to introduce Dr. Elena Gillespie. Upon receiving her PhD in human development, she collated her notes from her dissertation about transpersonal modes of dying and produced the first in a series of books about the multiple dimensions in which we live. Elena was steeped in quantitative research in diabetes, traumatic brain injury, and in alternative medicine over her professional career. With the death of her father and a burning drive to find a better way to perceive death and dying, her book was born. Her book, The Anatomy of Death, Notes from a Healer's Casebook, is now on Amazon, and I highly recommend that you check out her well-written blog, A Farther Axis. Thank you for being here, Elena. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jesse Solstrin. He's an internationally recognized leader and workplace expert working at the intersection of individual and organizational success. His innovative ideas on leadership and changing world of work have been published in a variety of online and print publications, including Inc., the Huffington Post, the Chicago Tribune, the Washington Post, and many, many more. He's been featured on a number of television and radio programs such as MSNBC, Fox, and NPR. His books include The Manager's Dilemma, Beyond the Job Description and Remaking Communication at Work, and have helped to establish his place in the next generation of influential thinkers, challenging everything we thought we knew about success at work. Welcome, Jesse. Is he there?
Great to be here. Thank you.
Next, Dr. Kathy Marshak is a licensed psychologist with more than 40 years of experience as a marriage and family therapist and business coach. Dr. Marshak has published 2 books that explore the complex psychology that impacts family when a member has Asperger's syndrome. They are Going Over the Edge, Life with a Partner or a Spouse with Asperger's syndrome, and Out of Mind, Out of Sight, Parenting with a Partner with Asperger's syndrome. Dr. Marshak was a contributor to the nationally acclaimed book, 60 Things to Do When You Turn 60, and she's been profiled by national media, including the New York Times, US Today, Business Week, and many, many more. So we're going to begin with the self-publishing process. I'm going to turn the mic over to Elena, and then I'll tell you my story, and then we'll continue with Jesse and Kathy. Elena, it's up to you.
Okay, thank you, Carol, very much for your introduction. I knew I was going to publish. As a matter of fact, I looked for many years for a traditional publisher with varying lukewarm to no responses at all, and always considered self-publishing. Things have moved very, very rapidly in self-publishing so far. Even 5 years ago, it was really considered death to your career as an author to do this. But as things moved forward, I realized that I wanted to maintain control over the process. And so I started, like any research project, I started educating myself on it. And of course, everything is on, everything's on the web, everything. I really spent a lot of time looking and really researching the project, the things I needed to do. And it's cumbersome, and there's a lot to do, but it's not rocket science. You can all learn how to do it. None of it is that complicated. People get very intimidated by, oh my God, I've got to incorporate. Well, if you're going to publish on Amazon, you almost need to, because they insist on a business bank account to deposit your royalties in. But it's not that hard, and it's not that expensive, and you don't need a lawyer to do it. There were a surprising number of processes that I did myself, and were pretty straightforward. Like I said, I did a lot of research on the web about it. There were a few things that I found were a little bit, I didn't expect them, but I ended up paying for them. One of them being is editing. There is nothing more depressing than to see someone have their self-published book out there, and they even may have some talent in writing, and they have done such a horrendous job of editing that it's embarrassing. I sent it out to an editor, and I also edited for content, grammar, flow, spelling, for at least let's put it this way, I lost count at 15 times. All right, and there was way more after that. And And the other one being is I paid for formatting. You can learn how to format. There are plenty of there's plenty of free open source programs out there, but it is laborious and time consuming. So I just ended up hiring it out. I was very lucky to find a good company to do that, and I think I will use them again in the future. I did get one response from a standard publisher who allowed cold submissions, right to their back door, so to speak. And one of them did actually respond to me, and thought it was okay, but wanted me to find an agent, and that was proving to be problematic. So I published on Amazon and a hard copy on Createspace. So they came out together. Amazon and Createspace are the game changers. And quite honestly, I've heard people have, oh my God, I've had all these problems with them. They're just such rip-offs and so on. I haven't had a moment's trouble with either one of them. They've been fabulous. They have been fabulous in their support. So that is my quick 4-minute, there you go. Edit, format, make it look professional. But that you can do this, definitely. So that's my 4 minutes. There you go.
Fabulous. Right, exactly, fabulous. And my story is basically I had always had a goal of writing a book. It was like floating around in my head for about 10 years. And when I completed my dissertation, I was in the discipline of writing every day, so it just seemed like the ideal time. I knew I wanted to stay close to my research. My dissertation research, I had studied social cognitive theory and interviewed executive coaches about strategies for building self-efficacy with their clients. But I wanted to make the book different. I wanted the book to be more of a practical guide for goal setting, for gaining confidence, to be empowering and to be motivational. So for the book, I developed a whole new research project where I interviewed women about a significant goal in their life. And the women who were interviewed for the book shared their successes and their struggles and their stories on goal setting. So I would say that the book is somewhat based on my dissertation in that I do reference the research. It's evidence-based, and it supports the building of the women's stories for gaining confidence and overcoming obstacles. Now, my process, before I graduated July 2014, but before that, I began interviewing authors that I knew personally. Some would say I was picking their brains. I had read all of the books on publishing that I could find. I researched the smaller publishing houses, the ones that I had in my library, the books that I liked the layout, Anchor Publishing, Aloha Publishing, and another one called She Writes Press. And their processes sounded great. They all sounded, very experienced. They went from editing to proofreading to printing. Costed about $5,000 to $10,000. And they took a cut of your sales. And if you wanted anything in the way of marketing or promotions, that was an extra fee. So I had just added a new student loan. So I decided to pursue the self-publishing process to keep expenses down and then also to keep the profits from the sales. One of the authors I had interviewed, she became my coach on self-publishing, and I used her editor and I used her book designer, her graphic artist, to help prepare my book to upload it to Createspace, as Elena had mentioned. That's the on-demand publishing part of Amazon. So I wanted to sell on Amazon. Then I began, so I graduated in July, began writing in September, and by June 2015, the manuscript was ready for proofing and typesetting for publishing on Createspace. The manuscript was uploaded in July, and then we added Kindle so that we'd have a Kindle version by August. And by the end of September, that's this September, it will be available on a second website that allows for distribution through Barnes & Noble and independent bookstores. And those on-demand publishing houses are Ingram, INGRAM, and the other one is called Light bright publishers. And that's where I am today. That brings me right up to the present. So there are 2 self-publishing stories, and I want to turn it over now to the traditional publishing process. And I'm going to ask Jesse, will you tell us your story?
Sure, thank you. One of the things that I heard James Carville say a long time ago, he's the political commentator and has a great deal of wit and Southern charm. He said that at a ham and egg breakfast, the chicken contributes, but the pig commits.
Okay.
And publishing to me is like that breakfast, but I think most people are chickens. And I don't mean they're afraid, I just mean they think it's a good idea and they kind of think it sounds nice to have something in print. And that's kind of how I was when I started. I thought it was going to be an easy transition from PhD to publishing. But I hit the ground fast and reality sunk in after my 6th rejection letter. And I realized that I didn't really know why I was doing it. I had to pause and question, did I want to keep trying? Did I have a voice? Did I have something I wanted to say that I thought was important? And as I answered those questions, yes, yes, and yes, I realized that for me, the bigger picture was thought leadership, and that I was already doing it as a coach and as a leadership consultant, doing change work with people and organizations. And I kind of relaxed a little bit and stopped trying to control it. So either because of just dumb luck or persistence, or both of those, in addition to letting go of trying to control everything, I ended up about a month later with 2 book contracts simultaneously. So I don't recommend writing 2 at a time. That actually takes a toll on you. But it just goes to show you that you can kind of crack the code if you stay at it. And if you're writing because you need to write and you really have something important, I think that fuels the drive to keep going. So I would say if you're going to go the traditional route and work with one of the bigger publishers, just know that the landscape has changed quite a bit. It's an old adage that nobody makes money on books, but books can help increase the size of your platform. So if you're interested in having a career as a speaker or a coach or consultant, then it can be worth it to go that route, even though you won't necessarily make a lot of money. There are exceptions to that, of course. If you're a celebrity or you have a really tremendous platform to begin with, there still are large advances out there, and there still are really good book deals, and you can certainly hit a home run. But when it comes down to it, there are so many books published, and it's such a crowded field. I would say, hope for a yes, but plan for a few no's, but really commit like you're willing to just figure it out and find your niche, because that is one thing that everybody is looking for. A niche focus of a topic, an author that knows their audience, an author that's self-driven to really market and get the word out, and again, somebody who's persistent to really make it happen. So I can speak to my experience with Palgrave Macmillan. I've done my last 3 books with them. They're part of one of the largest publishing conglomerates in the world. So really small fish in a big pond. I've also self-published a collaborative piece, and I went through Lulu Press on that. Those were my first 2 books. I've actually made more money in royalties on those 2 books than I have on anything else. So it's not a dollars and cents thing. It's just about what you want to get out of it, and be happy to speak to those throughout the call today.
Thank you, Jesse. And Kathy, are you still with us?
I'm here. You can only see 4 faces, but I am here.
There you are. And tell us about your process. I believe you've done both the traditional and the self-publishing.
Yeah, you know, I was thinking about what to put in that people haven't already talked about, so that I don't repeat the idea. I both published through publishers and self-published. My first book was published in 1998, Entrepreneurial Couples, Making It Work and at Home, and it was based on my dissertation. But I didn't plan to write a book. Instead, I got a phone call from a journalist at Inc. magazine saying that he wanted to write about husbands and wives who work together. So, and I said, well, how'd you find me? And he said, believe it or not, he looked at Dissertation Abstracts International because he was looking for an expert on this subject, and I was it. That book, and as a result of that, I decided to write a book. It was picked up by Davies Black Publishing, and I do have it on Kindle as well. But the thing is that what was fascinating about this is that you're talking about a niche market, Jesse. You know, as a result of writing about this subject, I get calls. I still get calls. I mean, that book came out in 1998, guys. I graduated from Fielding in 1994. And I still get calls from all over the world. I have a call from a Brazilian newspaper about entrepreneurial couples, and they published it in Portuguese. So if you pick a subject that has evergreen appeal, which this one does, you're going to get calls for the rest of your life about the subject, even if your books aren't selling, but I still sell them on Amazon as well. And then my experience with self-publishing is because I started before self-publishing was such a big deal, I went with my next book on Asperger's, Going Over the Edge. I went with a publisher, a niche publisher who publishes autism and Asperger books. But when I wrote my second book on Asperger's, I thought, you know what, I think I can make more money if I self-publish. And so even though I had a book contract, I said, would you let me out of the contract? I self-published through Createspace. It's on Amazon, it's on Kindle and, paper. And, I sell probably 30 books a month. I don't know how many people sell, but I have a niche. And so that's not a lot. It doesn't make you a ton of money, but you're absolutely right. It positions you in the marketplace. So that with my books on Asperger's, I have following. I'm on Amazon UK, Amazon Germany, Amazon India, Amazon Canada, Amazon Australia, because these are subjects that people around the world want to know more about. That makes sense. I don't know. One of my books is in Chinese. I don't know how that happened.
Congratulations. That's great.
Thank you.
So you mentioned, promoting the book. One of the things that I forgot about when I wrote the book was there was more after the book was printed and developed, that you had to get out there and you had to actually promote the book and continue with promoting. And I wanted to ask Jesse if he would describe what he did for promoting his book. One thing that I had to do was pay all of my individual costs in doing that, and I needed help. I actually got a coach to help me with the social media and the how-to parts. I'm wondering, Jesse, did any of your publishers help you with the promotion process, or how much did it cost?
Well, there are a couple routes you can take, and I think there's one thing as far as the mindset that should be a must across the board, and that is plan to be a shameless self-promoter for your own good. And being an introvert myself, I actually had a hard time getting there. I realized that I was writing books to help people, helping leaders have a better working life and solve problems. So once I really grasped that, it was easier for me just to say, hey, I have a book. I really think you should take a look at it. And so whether you're blogging, using social media, or making contributions through other websites, you have to plan to milk every ounce of content from your book, socialize it in as many ways as you can, and really get yourself out there. The publishers will promise you a lot, and they have dedicated staff. For my book that came out in July called The Manager's Dilemma, they gave me 2 publicists in the UK, and the reality was they didn't do much. They went after some short lead and long lead placements, and they submitted for a couple lists, but at the end of the day, I think I got maybe 4 placements. I generated about 15 on my own, just through relationships and asking people to do author Q&As and things like that. So you can't really count on the publisher to do much. When your book launches in a window, just by the way, it's now a year-long calendar. There used to be more of a season for business and management books. Now it's year-round. People are always reading books because of the ease of mobile technology. And so your book might come out, and a week later, another 150 will come out. So you're going to get lost in the shuffle. If you decide to invest yourself in a publicist, those will range anywhere from $10,000 to $35,000 for a campaign. And what you're doing is you're investing in a short-term 6 to 8 week campaign around the book's launch. So when your galleys come out and review copies, The publicist is going to send it to everybody on their list. They're going to try to get you reviewed. They're going to try to get people who write for newspaper outlets and magazines to write a piece and give you a mention. And that's a lot of money, and you kind of get what you pay for. So if you do that investment, you might be able to bolster your credibility because you'll get featured in some things. But it is a campaign, and it's therefore short term. So I think that mindset I mentioned is really critical, that you plan on a long-term investment on your own to really try to get the word out. So have a good website, have a social media presence, and socialize, socialize, socialize.
Social, what was that word? Socialize?
Yeah.
Socialize. So the old-fashioned way of networking. And
well, in the modern way, using the ability to use social media to get your book into organizations. So people are talking about it, sharing it, adopting it in programs, and so forth.
One of the books that I read on as I started out on my journey, I don't know if you can see this, and I don't have any shares in the book, but it's called Plug Your Book. It's by Steve Weber. It's for online marketing for authors, which has been tremendous help for me in getting my knowledge around social media, which I was very low in. And the other one is The Frugal Book Promoter. The Frugal Book Promoter is by Carolyn Howard Johnson, and this one has been a lifesaver for me. I spent most of my budget on getting the book up onto Createspace through the designer that I had hired to do that. And so most of the budget for that went for her, which was perfectly fine. But when it came to promoting, I've only spent right now about $1,000 on the promoting of the book. And it's all been through social media and speaking engagements, and very frugal mindset on getting the book out there. So let's see, when we think about the costs of publishing, are any of you, Jesse, we talked to you, Kathy, could you have some input on that for us?
I'm the last person who should answer that one, because I'm one of these people who write because it's fun, and I stumble around with costs. I did use Createspace. It is I guess you could say it's spendy, but it saves you time for sure. I hired a private editor because Createspace editing is minimal. I just needed somebody who could really help me clean it up so it sounds like me. I also hired artists for the covers. I didn't like the covers that Createspace comes up with, those kind of things. So I might have spent more, but I don't think it really costs that much, because I love to write. I'm working on yet another book, and I figure, it depends on what your goal is. I mean, I don't think anybody here is making a fortune on their books, but like you said, if it's something that people want to read and gets passed around and people order your book and you're getting calls to make a presentation, then you're making money by developing your practice as a psychologist, if that makes sense. At least that's how I look at it.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree. I'm hoping that my purpose in writing the book was to get out there, to be able to do speaking engagements, to get better known, to be marketing my brand, to be getting into organizations for leadership development and training types of programs. So, and plus I had, as I said, it was a burning desire to write the book. Elena, did you keep track at all of costs during the publication process?
Oh yes, I think it's really important that you do make an in and out sheet, so to speak. If you're not capable of doing a budget, which is probably my category, I would say I would have to agree with Kathy. It cost me, in little bits and pieces, probably about $1,000 to print it or to publish it. Yeah, and that's format, editing, cover, everything. And it wasn't all at once. And So, the cost was really not all that bad. Of course, marketing is the golden key. It really is. And I remember reading one of the multitudinous books that I read on marketing and getting your material out there in the amongst many other voices that are out there. And she said something very interesting. And she's like a very specialized genre, like some sort of artwork. I don't even remember what it is that she writes. But she said, you have to love your fans. And that means that you have to get out there, and you have to do in the way you feel best. You have to get out there and you have to talk to people and socialize. And that doesn't, I personally, maybe this is wrong, but I personally hate Facebook and I hate Twitter. I can't stand them. I think they're I can't stand them. I'm sorry. It's just me. I absolutely loathe them. But I also find that there's a lot of other ways that are, I feel, more suited. I mean, I've got a real specific niche in terms of, who's going to be reading this book. So, I'm going for, the spiritual blogs, the spiritual meetups, and but I'm also going for the academic as well. So I have to direct what I do towards very, very specific audiences. And, it's not an avalanche by any means, but things are picking up. I was doing a book signing this last weekend, and several people in academia and in palliative care and in hospice came up to me and said, gee, I saw this on whatever it was, I saw your blog, or I saw this and it's been making the rounds. And I'm thinking, that's the best news I've had all weekend. So it's nothing beats talking to the people and saying, here's my thing. And what I discovered also for myself, because I was also kind of like, I don't know, I'm not sure about this. I don't think I want to put myself out here. Until I realized that, at least to me, my message is more important than me. All right, it doesn't. I don't really care if it's my message about death and dying that I'm putting out there, and how we can improve it. Whether it's my face does not really matter in the mix. It's what I'm saying and how many other people can I convey this to. So talking one-on-one, you can't beat it.
You can't beat it. Now, I would like to take just a little commercial break in the middle of the webinar to ask our audience, as they're thinking of questions, there's a Q&A portion that we're having at the end of the program. So if you would write down your questions, you can note who you would like to direct the question to. I'd be happy to ask them as we reach halfway, 3/4 of the way through the program. So please write your questions in. We'll be happy to answer them. So changing gears now, I'd like to look at collaborating with others, and not just us writing the book, our personal endeavor, but have you been working with others? I know, Kathy, you have, and I believe Jesse had some collaboration with others. Would the two of you address that question, your experience collaborating with others in your writing?
Well, I haven't collaborated with Jesse, but I would like to. That would be fun. Well, my collaboration, my one publication is amusing because it's called 60 Things to Do When You Turn 60. So I got a call from one of the editors of the book, and she said, her name is Joy Darling. She said, I'd like you to write a chapter in this book. And I was 54, and I said, but I'm not 60. And she said, oh, you're close enough. And then I said, well, who's going to be in this book? And she said, well, Gloria Steinem, Garrison Keillor, people like that. And I said, and you want me? I can't believe you're picking me. And she said, well, yeah, we want some ordinary people too. And I thought, oh, so I'm ordinary. But I couldn't think of what to write. And this is really was fun, though, because she said, just come up with something that you think is inspiring. So I wrote a chapter on being arrested and going to jail. which I have done twice, sadly. It really was their most favorite chapter. And then it also you got to be careful about how you get publicity, but sometimes bad publicity is better than no publicity, right? So this book, 60 Things to Do When You Turn 60, came out about the same time that Martha Stewart was arrested and sent off to jail.
Oh, timing, perfect.
It was perfect because they they said, gee, maybe Martha should have read Dr. Marshak's chapter before. And then, a couple years later, I got a chance to give Bill Clinton a copy of the book when Hillary was running for president the first time. And I went to a fundraiser, and she was turning 60 that year.
Perfect.
So I gave him the book, a copy of the book, got my picture with Mr. Clinton, and when I handed him the book and told him it was for his wife's birthday, he said, well, how sweet. And it was pretty cool. So I have his picture up in my office.
So
that's my story of collaboration. It's not quite exactly what you had in mind, but it worked out very well.
I think it's a great story. Thank you very much, Kathy. And Jesse, are you there?
Yeah.
Well, your face. That's why I'm asking.
Kathy being a promoter to a former president, that's exactly what I meant when I said, you have to get out there and overcome any shyness. So I've collaborated a couple times, and I prefer writing myself because for me, it's the creative outlet first and foremost. And I'll always be putting pen to paper in some form. So I like that individual solitary process. The first two books I did were with the late Barnett Pierce and Kim Pierce. Many of you might know Barnett Pierce or remember him from Fielding. He's a communications professor for many years, and the coordinated management of meaning was a communication theory that he helped to pioneer. And at Fielding, a lot of students got interested in the application of that work because it really crosses over well to organizational and community situations. One of the things that Barnett always self-professed was that he was horrible at taking something that was academic and conceptual and making it real and tangible and accessible. So after working with him in a few classes, I pitched an idea and I said, well, that's the world I'm in. I barely understand this stuff at an academic level. Let me help translate it. Let's write something together that can be like a field guide and we'll have an accompanying workbook. So we did that, and I think a lot of people got benefit from it because it took something that many people wanted to understand but just couldn't deal with the upfront opportunity costs of investing the time, and so it's accessible. That's one example. Like you, Kathy, I've also been asked to contribute a chapter in an edited volume, and actually that's coming out in another couple months, and so I have a chapter in that. That was my first time working with editors in that regard, and I found that enjoyable. The commitment is a lot less significant, so if you're on this call right now and you're thinking, I know I want to have a voice, I want to be a thought leader, I want to develop, but it's too overwhelming to do a book, maybe think about that concept of a chapter and just put your feelers out there for people that might be looking for contributors in an edited volume.
Can I say one more thing? Do we have enough time?
Yes. Sure.
I have a feeling that I don't know if most of the participants in the seminar, it looks like somebody's a clinical psychologist. I'm a clinical psychologist. So writing for me, I am an introvert. It's about really writing something that I believe my clients could use. And then it's different than looking for a book to be, from a more business aspect of it. I don't think like a business person, although I've been self-employed forever. But I have to say, even if you're writing a clinical book, my books are in MBA programs. I had no idea, and they're clinical books, but they were picked up to show another side of working with the human element. So you never know where your books are going to go.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Very good point. And Kathy, you mentioned the question. I'm going to read that now. It's for Jesse. It's from Michelle. And she says, it sounds like increasing your platform is the main advantage of traditional publishing. Does traditional publishing offer any other advantages over self-publishing in your experience? Does traditional publishing offer any other advantages over self-publishing in your experience?
Well, I think Michelle asked a really good question because depending on the route you take, your experience will be different. I think one advantage is, there's an argument about the credibility of self-publishing versus publishing with a major publisher. And I think that is a shut case to the extent that print on demand and self-publishing has produced many fantastic works that hold up against books that are published by the world's best publishers. So if that's not a question for you, then you turn to the logistical piece. And I think that's where the main advantage lies. So for example, if you have an acquisition editor that buys your book, they're going to give you a publication schedule, everything from the concept development through the actual production process. And that's all taken care of. So you have to hit your marks and deliver your chapters based on the timeline, but you're going to have an entire team behind you doing certain things. Yes, a lot of that is outsourced now. It's not likely that you're going to get a really engaged editor who knows your subject matter and spends a lot of time wrestling with concepts and helping you figure out the placement. They would prefer that you deliver a very well-written draft that they can do proofreading and copy editing on and call it a day. But you do at least have those people. So if you don't want to do a budget, you don't want to figure out who's going to design your cover, you don't want to figure out how to upload something, then go with the publisher route, because that's taken care of and it's typically done really well.
And I had a question, Jesse, the publisher route, what's the cost for that?
There's no upfront costs. If you have an advance as part of your contract, then that's against future royalties. So you need to sell a certain amount of books to get that back. And once you have your royalty costs recouped, then you get a residual based on whatever your contract was. It's usually 6 to 10% and can be as high as 15 to 20% on ebooks. But you really don't have any costs.
Okay, thank you, Jesse.
There's another kind of self-publishing too, and people can do this. I mean, it really is just putting a PDF on your website. It can be very brief. You can charge for it through PayPal or however you wish. It's not like you're going to get a lot, but it is a place to start. And one of the promotional things that I've done in the past is put up a chapter when I'm self-publishing. If I'm working with a publisher, they're not going to let me do that. But I put up a chapter and start promoting the book before it's even done. And sometimes I have people download it for free. Sometimes I charge people for it. Just depends.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, allow me to interject here. Yeah, I was doing the same thing. I was putting up a little snippet here and there on my website just as teasers. And once I went on to Kindle Select, which is a special program that Amazon offers for the first 3 months, if you choose to do it that way. But then I immediately took it down because they have rights for 3 months. But definitely, let's make clear here, there's a difference between traditional publishing, print-on-demand publishing, which is what Createspace does, as in, you can go to Createspace and yourself buy, I don't know, whatever, 50 copies or 100 copies or whatever on demand. They print it as it is necessary and you buy them at cost. That's what makes the process so economical, is it is print on demand. What used to happen is vanity publishing. That is, you went to somebody, if you wanted to do it yourself, not traditional. Traditional publishing should, as Jesse said, cost you nothing. So if you go to a traditional publisher and they say, oh yes, we want to buy your book, but it's going to cost you $20,000, back away quickly. Vanity publishing is where you go to them with your finished text and you have them print it. You have them print it. All right. They're not doing anything for you. In terms of editing or formatting or the cover design or anything. You've gone to them with a finished copy. People used to do that quite a bit. I think they still do, actually, particularly for art picture books, because they don't really sell very well. Typically. And that can, and they'll just have a run of 5,000 books made. So there's a difference. There's different little areas. that so the vanity publishing is different from print on demand, which is different from these organizations like Carol went to, where you went to them and they provided you with a range of services, and traditional publishing. All right, and ebooks. Ebooks is yet another format. So I just wanted to be clear on that.
Thank you, Elena. That was a great distinction with all of those different types of publications. Thank you very much. I'm going to field a question from our audience. PJ Albert is asking Kathy, say more about the international rights of self-published books. How did you end up being translated into Chinese? And I assume that you continue to own the copyrights, so didn't you need to approve the translation?
This is a great question, because I haven't a clue. All I know is that book, that was the entrepreneurial couple book. Okay, so that's the Chinese are very interested in American business. So I think that they just bought the rights to the book from my publisher, and we're hoping to, I don't know, sell it. To their business clients. So I don't really know about that. In terms of my other books that are on Amazon, distributed around the world, I mean, I have one self-published, and I own that book. I have one that's published by a publisher, a traditional publisher, and they own that book, and I only get royalties, and I assume they take care of all the legalities of international rights and so forth. But so maybe our two business publishers know a bit more about how that works. I just didn't worry about it. Maybe I shouldn't be admitting this on a recording, but I don't know.
Very honest. Kathy, you bring up a really good point, though, about rights to the book, which is one of the reasons that I went the self-publishing route, because when I had interviewed the publishers, they owned my file. If I wanted to do anything with the book afterwards, I had to get their permission. And I wanted to have control over my book. I wanted to be able to sell it, change it, make it into a training program, add any types of models or things that I wanted to do. So that was one of the reasons I went to self-publishing. So when you say they own the rights, do they own your file 100% for this book that you were talking about?
Yes, Davies Black owned the book, and they sold the rights to some Chinese publisher to publish it in Chinese. And all I got, I got some publicity. I can say I've got a book that's in Chinese, sure. But I still only get just my royalties off the sales of those books.
Okay.
Whereas the self-publishing, you do get more money, but you also have more opportunity. It's not that much more money. You just have more opportunity to morph it the way you want to. For example, I have another book that I would like my publisher to put on Kindle, but they just won't. And with my books, they're on Kindle, print on demand. I'm going to make sure they get out there in any format that's popular.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm going to field another question. Jacqueline Silver asks, could you speak to the process and cost of book cover design? And I will address a portion of that and invite the rest of the panel to also contribute. I was very lucky to have a daughter-in-law that's a photographer, and she created my cover. She had a beautiful photograph that I had specific idea in mind of what I wanted for the cover of the book. And she also did my photo for the back of the book. So it's a very expensive process. I was just very, very fortunate. And I turned that over to the woman who was my graphic designer. She added it. She designed the inside of the book, added the cover file from my daughter-in-law to the outside of the book, which made it very inexpensive. But if you have someone that's designing the book cover, it's much more expensive. And Kathy or Elena or Jesse, do you have an experience with that you could give us an idea of what that cost would be?
Well, very, very briefly, I also I used the Createspace template, but I used a photo that I bought the rights to. And because I tried designing my own, it looked like garbage. I could not, my problem was that, and you've got to be very cold in your assessment of your abilities to do this, all right? I looked at it, I tried real hard, and it still looked like garbage. So anyway, I did, but I had this photo I had bought, and I did want to use it. I liked the photo. Anyway, so I went to Createspace, and they have many templates, and it really is a very, very simple process. I've had many people come up to me and say that the cover, they loved it. See, the problem being is that my genre is not fiction, and it's not like an entrepreneurial book. It's more of a spiritually based book. And so I had to really get the right tone on it. And so I was happy with how that cover turned out. I've had many people tell me that they loved it, and my fiance says he hates it. So, you know, I don't know what to tell you on that. I do know that it can be spendy. So I'll be quiet now and let others talk on their experience.
One thing I'm going to tell you is put your picture on your book. Because people want to see the author. So put your picture on the book and be yourself, and make sure it's on the front or the back, I think is important.
Anything from Jesse?
No, Michelle's earlier question about what are other advantages, this is another example of that. You're going to have a professional jacket designer do it. You might not love some of their design choices or the creative execution, but you get some input on that, but you don't have to figure out all the file sizes and dimensions of images and things like that, which can be kind of stressful because you really want that to be good, and it's hard to do it on your own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would pay for it. I would pay to get it done because I'm not that clever. So,
Carol, can I add one thing here about this that a lot of people miss? If you are going to find a photo or use someone else's photograph or use content that you grab off the web, you make absolutely certain that you have purchased or released the rights to that photo. There are numerous sites that you can go to. This photo the photo of me was taken by a professional photographer, and he gave me the rights to it. The photo in the back here, this painting of the cover, is something that I went to iStock Photo and I leased it, all right, for I think 250,000 replications, and it wasn't very expensive. It was like $20. But you make absolutely certain that is the last thing you want is the owner of some photograph or painting or picture come back to you and say, you either take that off or we're going to do a cease and desist letter.
Mm-hmm.
So you make sure that you have the rights to everything.
Yes, absolutely. As I said, I was very, very fortunate that my daughter-in-law is a professional photographer, and she had the exact picture that I wanted, and she was able to take my picture. So I was very, very fortunate. We're grabbing a couple more questions, and as we head to the close here, how did you all go about engaging the media with your book release? Those of us that had media.
I'm still working on that part.
I wrote my own press releases and got contacts for the newspapers for my book release. Kathy?
Yeah, there's lots of ways to do that. Yeah, you can write a press release. It has to be genuinely news. So you can't always just write something up that says, gee, I'm a wonderful person or my book's great. It has to be news. So you might look at how your book will be of interest to the public and how it's new and fresh in some way. And you can send out press releases that cover different aspects of your book. I like social media. I have a meetup group And that's how I got the book spread around the world. I started a meetup group just as a support group for people with autism in their family in my area in Portland. And when I started getting people requesting to join the group from Finland and Dubai and South Africa, I thought, oh my goodness. And so I didn't realize that there would be such an appeal. So I'm with Jessie. Socializing for us introverts, you use Facebook, and Meetup is an online thing for me. I mean, I do it strictly online. I have conference calls and things like that. But yeah, there's the PR part of it is you don't have to be an extrovert, honestly. You just have to be willing to put the message out on your website with blogs, press releases. Get yourself, I mean, this is what Wayne Dyer did, for God's sake. He wrote a book and then he went around calling up radio stations and said, hey, I can come on and talk about my book. And he was nobody before then. Well, he was a college professor, but you know what I mean. He hadn't got anybody's interest, but he just had a way of talking about his subject and reaching people.
Yes, and sometimes you are at the right place in the right time, and you are lucky. When I did my first,
Exactly.
Book signing, I got call when I was at the book signing in the bookstore from a radio station, and they asked me to come on the radio station. So it was being at the right place at the right time and doing all of the promotions for that particular book signing. And then one thing builds upon the other.
One thing I would add quickly to that is if you think about the popular format today, which is a 600 to 800 word piece, the contributors at some of the major online news sources are pretty regular, but they're always looking for content because content is so valuable. So if you take your book and you write a dozen 600 to 700 or 800 word pieces that are relevant and somewhat unique but tie back to your book's content, you'd be surprised what you can get. And I've become a regular contributor at Entrepreneur and Strategy and Business and Recruiter. And those were just based on trying to get the word out initially and writing something pretty decent and then having them come back and say, would you like to join as a regular? And that creates a lot of good traffic back to your site and back to your book if you can link to it.
So are you answering the question, how do you go about determining, the price of the book? I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong question. How do you go about determining the price of the book? Is there a minimum market price? Does anybody want to take that one?
Sure, I can at least start it. Createspace and Amazon, like I said, and Kindle, they were absolutely amazing. And they have little formula input on their pages, and they will literally calculate the minimum price that you should ask for based on your costs, and all you have to do is input your costs. They suggest a minimum price, and they also suggest a maximum price. If you go over, they'll give you more royalties if you place the price in that range. All right, if you go over, they start cutting down on your royalties, and if you don't meet that, well, that's kind of self-defeating. Why would you do that? So they're definitely, but having said that, prices are changing in the self-publishing world rapidly. To price something at 99 cents, you're really shooting yourself in the foot, and you're also telling your public that you don't value your words very much. So for an ebook, things are going for about, well, depends, but $3.99 to $5.99 for a new first-time author. I priced, and then your hard copy is going for around $7.99 to $9.99. After that, you're really starting to self-defeat yourself. But like I said, Createspace and Amazon, they will give you lots of help, and this is one of them they'll help you with.
All right, we're heading for the 2-minute countdown, and I'm going to go around to one last comment on pitfalls and things to avoid with the publication process. We have about 30 seconds each. Kathy?
Boy, what was the question? The pitfalls?
Yeah, what to avoid.
What to avoid.
make sure you just keep writing. Don't just keep
Yes.
going. Don't if you get discouraged. I mean, when somebody gives you feedback and they said this is the last thing, like if somebody said this is the last thing anybody on the planet should read, which by the way, that's a comment I got from one of my advisors with my dissertation. I went back to the drawing board and I said, okay, well, I'm going to do this again. So don't give up, because if you have a burning desire, if you've got a book inside that you want to write about, just don't give up. Just keep.
All right. Did we stop? Oh, I'm sorry.
No. Take your critics with a grain of salt. On Amazon or whatever, you're going to get some 4-star, 5 stars, 10, whatever it is, and you're going to get some 1 stars, and hey, it's all comes out in the wash. That's fine. You just have to ignore some of that stuff.
If you're self-publishing, get a good editor and proofread, 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 and then get another pair of eyes to proofread.
You can't edit enough.
Yeah, you're going to do a better job of proofreading or helping than some mainstream publishers. My first book had all kinds of errors, and it was because the publisher just didn't check everything.
Amen.
I would say get out of your own way, and if you're even on this webinar and thinking about this, you're prepared for it, and so just find your voice and trust in what you have to say.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and jump in, and I would like to say thank you so much to our panelists, Dr. Minsky, Dr. Gillespie, Dr. Sostrin, and Dr. Marshak. This has been fantastic, and there is a poll in progress right now. I see that most people have had a chance to go through some of those questions, and just as a reminder, this will be published on our alumni.fielding.edu website, and thank you so much.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Carol. Bye.